As the Senate's week in Washington concludes today, another week passes without the elusive text of a bipartisan border agreement. Now, as we've been talking about, as the details of this proposed agreement have kind of dripped out, support for the combined border security and supplemental funding for Ukraine, well, the support for that's hemorrhaged among conservatives. What does that mean for border security and for Ukraine and Israel funding? Joining me now is Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. He serves on the Senate Budget Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Johnson, welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Well, Tony, happy to be back. Good to see you.
So on Monday, there was optimism that we'd see text of a border security bill this week, but that eroded pretty quickly. Give us the latest.
Well, leadership staff briefed our staff and laid out the broad components of the bill, and simply have not been able to explain or answer our questions, the very legitimate questions concerning our concerns about the bill. You know, how this could actually secure the border, how this would actually force the Biden administration, which is a lawless administration, to do so. Now, I will say, I really feel kind of bad for James Lankford. He has been working his tail off. He's very knowledgeable about this. He gets along well with Democrats. He was the right person to try and negotiate this. The person who I think blew it was Leader McConnell. We had multiple conversations in Senate lunches about the lawless administration and why we needed some kind of enforcement mechanism. My suggestion is, it was actually John Hoeven's idea, but my suggestion was, let's tie Ukraine funding to border metrics. Make sure that this administration has to meet certain thresholds as the money was being metered out over a 12-month time period. That had a great deal of support within the conference. I'm not sure it was universal. There might have been some people that didn't like that. But without consulting the conference at all, Leader McConnell apparently told James Lankford, as our negotiator, it's not even on the table. Don't even bring it up. And we've heard from the Democrat negotiators that he didn't. And so that would have been our maximum point of leverage to actually get a deal that would secure the border. There wouldn't be this Rube Goldberg contraption that is being laid out for us right now that seems like it would normalize 4,000 to 5,000 illegal immigrants per year. Per day. That's completely unacceptable. And again, the negotiators, leadership cannot refute the concerns.
Senator, actually, you brought that point up weeks ago on this program, tying it to the metrics so that there's accountability there. But also, is it not necessarily, I think you actually brought this point up as well. It's not necessarily an absence of laws and policy that's needed. It's the enforcement of current laws. I mean, the border was pretty much secure in the final year of Donald Trump with the Remain in Mexico policy. I mean, is it not just going back to revisiting what worked before?
Yes. I mean, we have the laws on the book if they are actually enforced. If you had a president that wanted to secure the border, which is why if you're going to do a deal with this president who wants an open border, who caused the problem. I mean, Joe Biden and his Democrat colleagues in Congress are the root cause of this problem. It's like trying to negotiate with the arsonists to put out the fire. So you actually have the authority. Now, could there be things that we could pass in law that would make it easier, that would make it very difficult to challenge certain actions in court? Absolutely. But apparently the Democrats aren't really trying to negotiate those provisions. They're trying to negotiate political cover because Mayor Adams said the 100,000 people in New York City are going to destroy the city. You have the mayor of Chicago saying the same thing. So now the news media is having to report this. So there's political pressure on Democrats. But again, they want an open border. They really don't want to vote for provisions that would give us a secure border. They want political cover, which made it very difficult for James Lankford.
Right. And I think you made the point yesterday in a press conference, or it was one of your colleagues, that if this is allowed, this new standard of 5,000 to 10,000 illegals a day being able to come across the border, we've capitulated on the current law, and this could make the situation worse if you have a president that's willing to enforce the law in the next administration.
Yeah, the concern I had, again, the thresholds as we're hearing is 5,000 per day over 7 days. That is mandatory that you have to shut down the border. I mean, I'm still asking them, how do you do that? They haven't answered that question. But at 4,000, it's discretionary. My concern is if that would tie a president's hand who actually wants to shut it down at, let's say, 500 a day.
Right.
Remember, Jay Johnson said 1,000 people a day. First of all, it's a bad day for him, but it overwhelmed the system. Why aren't we setting the threshold at 1,000 and then shutting down the border? You know, not even accepting asylum claims, fingerprinting people and sending them home. That would work.
Right.
But 4,000 or 5,000, the cartels will meter that amount in here, and that's why I think we would normalize a flow of illegal immigrants at 4,000 or 5,000 days. Completely unacceptable. That's really the peak of President Trump's crisis, but that was only for a month. And then over 12 months, he brought it down to 570 a day.
It's kind of like legalizing lawlessness would be what the new standard would do. Let me ask the next question then, because we've been hearing for weeks, actually before the end of the year, of last year, that the supplemental funding for Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, that was going to be connected to the border security. If the border security provision is falling apart, Ukraine doesn't have a lot of support. What does that mean?
Well, I think you just laid it out. I think it's going to be some real trouble for people who want to provide support for Ukraine. And I think most Americans do, but they're not sure they want to just write another $60 billion blank check. What I would suggest, if people really want to push that through, at a minimum, pay for it. You know, there's $400 billion of green energy boondoggle spending the Democrats passed under reconciliation. Goldman Sachs has an estimate that would actually cost about $1.2 trillion. You know, why don't you at least start from the standpoint that you're going to pay for any supplemental funding? You can also ask the question, what are we getting for $880 billion a year in defense spending? You know, why is everything an add-on? Why is everything supplemental?
Yeah, good question. I think that's the only way they're going to be able to move forward. Now, there is, I think, broader support for the small amount of money, $13 billion for Israel. The House already passed that with the pay-fors, offsetting that from the IRS new money. Will we see any movement in the Senate on that? It's been languishing over there for weeks.
We should see movement. Again, this is a perfect example of, Democrats never compromise. Their view of compromise is for Republicans to cave, which in the past, generally Republicans always have. It's their way or the highway. It's always been that way. They're not willing to say, yeah, we also want to support Israel, and okay, we'll suck it up and we'll reduce the funding for the IRS by $13-14 billion. They just refuse to do that. Hopefully public pressure will get them to change their mind.
Senator Johnson, I want to switch gears here. You have been the strongest voice bringing awareness to what is happening with the World Health Organization there in the Senate. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the WHO's Director General, was saying earlier this week that the pandemic accord, which you and I have talked about multiple times, that the WHO has been working on for the last 2 years, is at risk of failing because of fake news and disinformation. And frankly, I'm actually a little encouraged by that because it tells me we're having an impact.
Well, first of all, that's an explanation from a totalitarian. We may be. I'll tell you, we're not getting much traction here in Congress. It's a partisan issue. My amendment on a bill was completely partisan. Every Republican except for the bill sponsor voted for my amendment that would have deemed that those amendments a treaty subject to ratification in the Senate, and every Democrat voted against that. So Democrats actually apparently want to give up U.S. sovereignty. It's maybe good news that this is being delayed a little bit. This will probably need a global lobbying effort. We need to get to other countries and let them realize, too, that their national sovereignty, their health freedom may be taken away from them in this very dangerous negotiation. So this has got to be an all-out effort right now between now and when they bring this to a vote.
Yeah, in May. But they're also they're doing a full court press to scare people into this. I want to play a clip of Ghebreyesus last week at the World Economic Forum, where he had this to say, not only about the agreement, but kind of their latest scare tactic.
The other key in order to have better prepared and to address the disease X is the pandemic agreement. The pandemic agreement can bring all the experience, all the challenges that we have faced, and all the solutions into one. And that agreement can help us to prepare for the future in a better way, because this is about a common enemy.
So I don't know if you caught that. He's hard to understand, but Disease X is something that they have now introduced. Now, it's a make-believe fictional disease, but they're suggesting that it's 20 times greater in terms of its impact than COVID-19. I mean, this looks like a scare tactic.
It's a total scare tactic. You know, Eisenhower in his farewell address warned us about four things. The final thing is he talked about we cannot let global society fall into a state of dreadful fear and hate. But we've seen that with it's climate change. It's scare the you-know-what out of people so that you can gain greater control. They did the pandemic, and now that the pandemic is passed and all their measures weren't completely adopted, now they've got to make up Disease X with a 20% mortality rate. I mean, this is sick, but this is what tyrants do. They control people. They take away your freedom based on a state of fear, of dreadful fear.
And we know from history that people will surrender fundamental freedoms when they are motivated and moved by fear. And I think it's a great parallel that you make with climate change. I mean, that's what we're told. We've got to give up national sovereignty. We've got to give up a quality of life because we have this carbon footprint. Only certain people have to give it up. I mean, the next thing, I mean, it could be, the planet could be targeted by an asteroid. So what are we going to have to surrender for them to protect the planet from an asteroid? The reality is we know that the World Health Organization, and you've spoken to this very clearly, was totally inept in COVID-19. So why would we give them more power?
Well, again, look at how much freedom was taken away and given up during the pandemic. And you have to understand the pandemic, in the end, the infection fatality rate was very similar to flu. We have a flu season every year, and elderly people are vulnerable to it. People with certain comorbidities are vulnerable to it, just like they were to the coronavirus. But we destroyed people's lives. We took away their freedom, shut down churches, but kept liquor stores open. It is shocking how people complied, but that's how effective fear is in the hands of a tyrant or tyrants.
So Senator, final question here for you. What's their end game? What are they after here at the World Health Organization with this pandemic accord?
A new world order, total control, a borderless world. I mean, that's part of the strategy behind an open border here in America. We have a land of plenty of opportunity. The rest of the world doesn't. Let the rest of the world in. That's their mindset. They want power. They want control. You will own nothing, but you will be happy. That's basically their rallying cry. It's sick. It's frightening. That is something to actually fear, the loss of your freedom. I'm just begging everybody, jealously guard your freedom, because there are a lot of people, a lot of tyrants, and they're in the news and they're in leadership positions that want to take your freedom away.
And the only thing standing in the way are freedom-loving Americans.
Absolutely.
Senator Ron Johnson, always great to see you. Thanks so much for taking time to spend with us today.
Stay well. Take care.